Good morning, good morning. I hope everyone had a chance to enjoy the little video that we had here as Telemundo. Telemundo is a proud sponsor and contributor to the U.S. Soccer Foundation. We're their official Spanish language media partner, but we are also the official broadcaster for the Women's World Cup that's coming up on July 20th. So hopefully everybody has a chance to watch us on Telemundo and Peacock. Shameless plug. But we're really here to talk about, we have a really important panel here to talk about. We want to tack along a little bit about what you've heard earlier on in the day, but what we are here to talk about today is really changing the face of soccer in the U.S. and how to continue to grow the game. So we have a very distinguished panel. Thank you all for being here. We have Tony Sanneh, founder and CEO of the Sanneh Foundation. We have Katlin Okamoto, Program Director, Coach, Mentor, Training, U.S. Soccer Foundation. We have Evan Whitfield, Vice President of Equity, Alumni Relations and Engagement for Chicago Fire FC. We have Sammy Berg, Senior Manager, Social Impact Adidas. And we have Diego Burato, member of U.S. Men's Futsal Team. So we're all here to talk about something that we've heard. We know that kids are dropping out at an alarming rate, especially during, quote unquote, their formative years. However, in addition to the barriers discussed earlier in the panels, we know that there's much more than that. So today we wanted to talk about some of the barriers at the grassroots level that stand in the way of enduring that participation and continuing to play the game of soccer. This panel will focus on the roles that influencers, coaches, brands, and leaders can make to change the culture of soccer in the United States. So we have a lot of folks here, lots to talk about. So I wanted to see if we can get started with Tony. Tony, what type of resources are out there for organizations to ensure that kids come first?
Well, when we heard before, JT said, we're one of the richest countries in the world, so we have the resources. And, hearing what we've heard today, is inspiring but somewhat disappointing, because I do believe we know more of the answers. It's just our commitment to make the investment at times. And as happy as I am, about Messi coming to this country, now you hear every player in the world thinking about transferring to another place in the globe that doesn't have maybe the shared values we do towards women and LGBT community. So one big question is are we willing to spend the resources that we already have and the answers that we already know to make the changes necessary? But locally, there are a lot of resources and people doing great work. And I just last week alone, our staff, we had 108 members that took training, the iMentor training, and it's a free course online as well. But they came in person with the U.S. Soccer Foundation, and I don't know if everybody knows that this is there for them. And like Ed said, it's not just about the X's and O's, but how do we become better coaches, which is really better community members. So there's resources like that. We're also partnering with Major League Soccer, and Sholeh, we'll talk about ourselves for a minute, but Sholeh really stepped up and mandated that every MLS academy has a culture coordinator. And actually, I'm going tomorrow and to train another 80 MLS Next Academy coaches so that they can go back and teach anti-discrimination policies within their club. And Evan is a Chicago Fire culture coordinator. So there are resources out there. I think the access to the information is important. And the leaders like U.S. Soccer, Major League Soccer, and U.S. Soccer Foundation, we need them all working together to communicate the big picture.
Thanks, Ed. I think what we've heard a lot of coaches. A lot of this falls on the coaches and the team. So Katlin, what role do coaches have in changing and growing the game of soccer in the U.S.?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And I feel like the last panel, as well as Tony, teed this conversation up super well. We obviously know that coaches are one of the most influential adult role models and leaders in a young person's life. We've heard this from parents in studies as well as from young people. And they really have the power to craft those environments that some of that research from the last panel is speaking to, the places where young people can have fun, where they can express their creativity, where they have a sense of belonging. we have responsibility to equip those coaches with the skill set, right, and the framework for understanding how to do that and how to do that well. And I think this is really important at the grassroots game. You know, I'm coming back to that conversation at the end of the pathways versus the pyramid, right? Most of our young people are going to participate in the game for enjoyment, for fun, for the social connections. How are we equipping the majority of our coaches, right, to approach their role as coach from that perspective? You know, I'm a product of a really, really wonderful community environment because of a local community coach. And, you know, I grew up in a small rural community in northern New Mexico. Soccer was not big. Basketball, football was big. We didn't have a soccer field. You know, when we played soccer, we put up pugs or put up cover goals. And this community member, regularly in the summers, you know, before he went to work at the art gallery, you know, 7 to 9 in the morning, would set up free training for anyone in the community who wanted to play. And, you know, in the winters, it would be inside in a gym at the local church, because that was the space that was available. And the environment that was created was quite unique because it was truly open to anyone. You know, we had players as young as 6 and as old as 28. You know, girls, boys, people identifying in different ways, those who were experienced, those who were really new to the game. And it created a space where those young people came because they wanted to, right? There was no requirement that they had to be there X number of days. They came on the days they wanted. And we would always have upwards of, you know, 30 to 50 people in a really, really tiny community where soccer wasn't very prevalent, right? And it was the intentionality of that community member to create that consistent and safe space over many, many years that led to the sport of soccer really growing in this northern New Mexico place. And we had people go on to play college soccer and professional soccer and continue to play into their older years recreationally. I think that's really, really the nature of what we want to do at the grassroots game. And so part of, I think, our role here is to think about how do we better, to Tony's point, open up these opportunities and let people know about the opportunities to train coaches to really think about centering how they create environments to work with young people that are safe, that foster belonging, right, and that are consistent for them to be a part of.
I think that's great. And I do have a follow-up question for you, but I'm going to get back to you because I want to jump over to Evan. Evan, what is the Chicago Fire doing to grow soccer in the region overall? And you have some great examples of what you've been doing. I think if you share them, people will be happy to hear them and see how we can replicate them. It's always train the trainer, ideas that can be passed along, that can be followed. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I want to, I've enjoyed the panel, and I think everyone this is a difficult thing that we're discussing because I think Tony has especially said it, right? These are issues that have been perpetuated, and I think sometimes pretend that we don't know how to address them and what the best ways to deal with them and change things, right? And I've also heard a lot about like incrementalism, right? Like this is going to take a long time, and Ed made the joke about, you know, soccer is the future and it always will be, right? So I'm sure most people don't know who I am, and I'm pretty direct, so I just wanted to start with that preface, and I'm going to quote James Baldwin very badly. You know, I love America, and I love American soccer so much, and that's why I reserve the right to perpetually criticize it, right? So anything that I say that seems counter to whatever else is saying or whatever seems like a criticism is just, it's come out of a place of love and not animus, right? So, I mean, what are we doing at the Chicago Fire? First of all, we've hired someone like myself, right? So not many clubs, MLS clubs, have a paid space for a person like me, especially at my level. And people always ask, like, what do you do? Equity, alumni relations, and engagement. Like, what does that even mean? And really, what I'm mostly doing is speaking to the majority white male executives in our spaces and the white male coaches who are coaching our academy kids or our adult or our youth recreation kids or our youth pay-for-play kids, right? And challenging the narratives that they just live in every day that they never challenge, right? So on the most fundamental level, that's what the Chicago Fire is doing, right? We participate in Tony Sanneh's Center for Wellbeing Culture Coach initiative, and we sent 2 people. We have spent tens and tens of thousands of dollars with Common Goal, which is a social impact initiative that Adidas sponsors. Also, and Tony Sanneh has worked with also in the past, and we send multiple people from our front office, from our community partners, from our fan groups to 100+ hour trainings in LA and Mexico, right? So we're really committing our time and our treasure to these issues. And the issue is like just in creating more inclusive environment. And I guess I can talk. I don't want to talk too much because we're doing a lot, but I will just say, as far as the coaching bit, I mean, I think that is the most fundamental thing, and we spend, a lot of time on this pathway, right? We have the first team, we have the second team, we have the academy program, we have adult recreation soccer. Within that, we just recently launched the Play Proud League, which is a adult recreation soccer league exclusively for LGBTQ+ people's community members and allies, right? And the sole purpose of that is to be intentional and welcoming and creating safe physical and psychological space for the LGBTQ+ community. On our website, we have the Progress Pride flag prominently displayed on our navigation bar next to the crest, right? We don't sell that to a sponsor. I'm sure if some sponsor wanted to buy it, we would sell it. But as we are here today for the last year, that's a Progress Pride flag, and we have that prominently displayed, right? We have recently hired a new academy coach, and we have turned over our staff of all white male coaches, right? And because we're in the city of Chicago, which is essentially a third, Latino, white, and black, we have hired black coaches, Latino coaches who speak Spanish. Language accessibility is a major thing, right? You're at Telemundo. A lot of MLS clubs don't have 100% Spanish language functionality on their ticketing websites, which is insanity because they're trying to sell tickets. We have done that in the last year, right? Is our website 100% equivalent to the English site in Spanish? Of course it's not. Do we need to do that? Yes, we do. The one club that does have a mirror image of its website is Montreal. And we're talking about resources. I also try to be more emphatic. When we talk about resources, we're talking about money and from certain people, from corporations and for government and from like angel donors, right? Billionaires. Why aren't we doing these things? In Montreal, they have that language equivalency because the government mandates it, right? We don't have those things here in the United States. So I've rambled too long, but we're doing a ton, and mostly it's just about being intentional and challenging people to do more.
But I think that's great. I think the challenge for others to see that, particularly in other languages, and is important, especially if you want to reach diverse audiences who love the game. Speaking of, again, I was lucky enough, I'm probably dating myself, but I was lucky enough to see the New York Cosmos when Pelé played, and that opened up an entire new love for the game. And back earlier to the panel, yes, in our neighborhood there were probably about 5-6 basketball courts, a couple of baseball fields, but no soccer pitches. So the soccer pitches that we used were the street. We played right out in front of our houses. Right there, I still have a couple of scars on my knees and legs from playing, but we had a lot of fun. But I think this goes back to you, my follow-up question with you, with what can coaches do on that grassroots level, where you're able to get into the community, deep into the community, where it may not necessarily have formal soccer teams or soccer academies, but there is a love for that game. How do we follow up with that?
Yeah, and I think it's been said already, but coaches, we need coaches to be trained, and we need all of us as leaders in the soccer space to train coaches to create these environments that youth are telling us they want to be a part of. Shola said earlier in the last panel, right? Once there's access given, right, we want to create an environment where they want to stay, and I think that's a big piece of growing the grassroots game. And so, how do we find more opportunities to implement training that really centers, hey, as a coach, your role is to teach soccer, but maybe first your role is actually to work with young people, right? And to create a space where those young people want to be present, they feel like they can bring their full selves, right? They are going to come to you and they're going to walk over those lines and they're going to bring whatever happened in school and their family environment and whatever else is going on. And as coaches, we need to be prepared to welcome that. to be able to link them to the resources that it might need, and then to utilize that space and that opportunity, right, to build more positive, trusting connections with those young people, to get all those results that Ed was talking about earlier in terms of the social, emotional, and behavioral positives that can come from a really well-intentioned sport environment. What we do know is that across all youth sports, only 1 out of every 3 coaches has any training in positive youth development. So there's a big gap between saying we want these environments to be created and what's actually happening in the training space. There are training opportunities available out there. And there's, we're amongst colleagues in the room who are a part of the Million Coaches Challenge by Susan Cragshange, looking to train 1 million coaches in positive youth development across all sports in the US in the next 2 years. So we can sort of change this paradigm around what it means to be a coach, right? I think that's the big thing. Yesterday I was in Alabama presenting around similar topics, and we had a really nice discussion. And one of the people in the room said, a coach developer for one of the NGBs was like, "This is fantastic. We want all of our coaches across all levels to embrace this framework for thinking about their role, but they barely have time to coach, right? They're community members, they're parents, they barely have time to coach." And I think that phrase is what we really need to flip. Like, what does it mean to coach, right? It doesn't necessarily mean, particularly at the grassroots level, just how to teach passing or basic tactics or rules of the game. Like, we want to create an environment where the kids have fun, and then they learn the game because they want to stay there and they want to belong, right? And they feel like it's a place for them. So how can we be part of changing that narrative so that not only do we get more young people into the sport, but those young people stay beyond 9, 10, 11 years old?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we want to keep them engaged, and so we've talked about big names coming in to the U.S. Messi, fantastic. I think you ask a lot of young folks, they'll know Neymar, Ronaldo, but I think they also started doing something else. We're talking about changing the game of soccer, and Diego, this question is for you. Maybe they all started playing something else, futsal. Can you tell the stadium a little bit more about what it is and how that's also helping to change?
Yeah, firstly, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to discuss about soccer, futsal, but even better, talking about the next generation. Because the next generation is gonna put us on the next level. That's why I believe. So I'm originally from Brazil. I grew up playing futsal, and then 4 years ago I moved to US. I'm living in Dallas, Texas. And just to introduce a little bit about futsal, futsal is a small side game, 5v5, 1 goalie, 1 goalkeeper, 4 on the court. We played on the hard surface, like gymnasiums, churches, but we also, unfortunately, don't have a professional league in the US yet, but we're gonna have that one day. That's my wish and my hope. And like I said, it's 5v5. The ball is heavier. It's smaller and low bounce. And it requires all technique to be developed players, to play for soccer. So just to introduce a little bit about futsal. So since the court is small, you are always on time space. You have to have a good technique to execute your technique, right? Your passing, your receiving, your shooting. So, and futsal is helping a lot, developing players and helping with academies, soccer clubs as well. So I think if you can combine those things, how can we make it work for soccer? Because great players, they came from futsal. Ronaldinho, Neymar, Ronaldo, the famous Messi, now he's here, right? So those players, they came, all of them from futsal. It means it works. It works. And if we can combine the futsal and soccer, because some clubs, Barcelona, in Brazil, we have a lot of, Italy, we have a lot of clubs doing futsal, combining those things. If we can do that with some clubs here in the US, I think we can find the next Messi, the next generation, making them better, and and make this country even better. Christian Pulisic, he played futsal, right? So it means for a fact that futsal works. And that's all. I mean, if we can find a pathway for these kids to play more and more futsal, I'm pretty sure we can definitely be on the next level.
Well, I think that's great. I think everybody, I don't know if anybody wants to chime in on that or not, but I think anything that we can do to encourage that participation at any level, to continue that growth, to continue that interest in there, it takes a while, because once you get in, you can get in it as a younger, and then managing to stay with it is a commitment. It's a physical commitment. It's a academic commitment. It's a commitment by the family to stay in there, and it's tough with lots of things going out there. But the more we can make this a positive, fun, continuous game that people are looking forward to, I think can make a tremendous difference in the engagement. We recently, with the Men's World Cup, we saw our ratings go through the roof, some of the highest record-breaking, but not just in Spanish language dominant viewers. You have viewers from others who are looking at this, which shows that the interest is growing on a much larger scale. So we're really excited for Women's World Cup, and of course for 2026 when it's here in all of North America. But Sammy, question for you. Lots of viewership, lots of eyes are on the players. How do you see, and what do you see the role of brands in helping to grow this sport? 'Cause I think that's really important. Everybody's looking at what everybody's wearing.
Everybody's looking at me because of Messi too. I think it's double effect. I think corporations' biggest role in this is really changing that perception. We've talked a lot about fun and a lot about the different types of soccer that's played. We want our consumers to understand that soccer is more than just men. It's more than just those with a higher socioeconomic status. It's more than just elite play. Like, it's futsal. It's kids in their living rooms kicking off their couch. It's like me taking a ball to the blacktop at my elementary school. And our ads and every single thing that our brand puts out has a role in changing that perception. Brands don't necessarily create the culture ourselves, but we're a big part of that voice. So we have a responsibility to use our platform and our resources to affect grassroots game, even if we're maybe not direct service on the lines like a lot of the people who have spoken today. Our work with U.S. Soccer Foundation is a huge part of that. They're not our only soccer nonprofit. As you mentioned, we work with Common Goal. And being the original soccer brand, I think that our nonprofit portfolio actually really doubles down on just how important we see this game to us. But that's an important piece, like looking for those opportunities to collaborate, to fund resources for kids, programs that are on the ground in hyperlocal communities. Because adidas is a global company. We're headquartered in Germany. We don't fully understand the issues that are facing each hyperlocal community or each kid, especially here in the States, where it's very different than like the Europe landscape for playing soccer. So the partnerships that we have really bring that layer of authenticity, that research, that data that helps drive the decisions we make. There's also pieces to our work that's, again, changing perception, addressing stereotype barriers that might be different across different cultures. I think a really good example, like a case study, if you will, of some work we've done in the last year is our work with EA Sports. Obviously, they have their formerly known as FIFA, EAFC game. We at Adidas release a Pride Pack every year. And a lot of the proceeds from that pack go to Athlete Ally, which is another organization we work with. Lots of inclusive coaching education in that portfolio of work. But this year's Pride Pack, we work with a South African designer named Rich Manisi, who is a member of the community, and being from South Africa has a huge interest in soccer. And so the team looked at it as an opportunity to have him design, for the first time, the MLS pre-match tops that a bunch of teams are wearing for their Pride nights. This is the first time it's been designed by the designer of the collection versus just, maybe putting a rainbow on the jersey. I think that's already a huge lean into further authenticity with that pack and speaking towards inclusivity in soccer. But the amazing thing that we did with EA, and I probably don't need to remind everyone of this, but esports gaming tends to be a very homophobic and transphobic place. So we saw that as an opportunity to take Rich Macy's design and put that pre-match top in-game. So when you're playing the game, you can play in a pride top and like re-express your care for that community. And I think that's kind of a unique way that's like something only a brand could do with our resource. Even we were just at the Just Ball Unity Cup in LA, and Ed and I love brainstorming together. So we're talking about things like, all right, Messi's coming. How can Messi be a part of growing grassroots game through Adidas resources, through our platform? Women's World Cup, how can Trinity Rodman do it? She's kind of the new face of this next generation of players. And then we get to also be more creative and say like, okay, we have Bad Bunny. How can he be a part of changing the face of soccer, changing our consumers' perception of what soccer is going to be going forward? So there's a lot there, but brands have resources that a lot of these other organizations don't. One of those isn't necessarily authenticity with the communities that need service, but that's why we can work together to create something really special.
I think that's a great example of, and another one that many brands should follow. I think for us here at Telemundo, it's one of the reasons why we partner with the U.S. Soccer Foundation to be able to work together and to be able to get that message out to a lot of the communities. But Tony, I wanted to get back to you. First of all, congratulations on what your foundation is doing. I think it's doing incredible work for a lot of different folks. What inspired you to get in there? How did that start? When did that spark hit you, and how did you just kick off? Because I think that's another good way to help other folks who may be thinking that way to try.
Well, I was an African-American kid in Minnesota. I would have hit the demographics at free and reduced lunch. My mom was really intentional about fighting for me, and we had a lot of coaches in the community that supported me. And I fell in love with the game of soccer, and I think what Shola said was pretty, the culture will have to change, and Major League Soccer and the NWSL will have the biggest impact on the sport growing. And realistically, you said, how is the country of immigrants not a soccer country? At some point, there became propaganda to invent our own sports and call them American sports, and soccer wasn't. At one point in this country, it was not good to be. You had to only do American things, and soccer wasn't one of them because it was here before. It came with everybody, and so if it came with you, then it wasn't good. But now it's access. So when we were little, and the internet would be the third, right? So when we were little, we would find out a parent that had some access to some soccer, and we could watch it. And now the kids get to watch Major League Soccer here or NWSL here on TV and cable, the internet. So that's the biggest one in creating the culture and getting access to it, just visually. We say a lot we don't have soccer fields. Every tennis court, basketball court is a soccer field, right? You can play futsal on it. So, but if the culture, people don't want to do it individually or as a team, they're not gonna. And so I had a group of people that I grew up with, and we won the national championship of this country. It was a group of 8 kids that played together in a small Minnesota neighborhood. But we loved each other, and we found people to do that. And so after I grew up, I knew I had a responsibility to come back, and I was the only male World Cup player. And surprisingly, Brianna was in the same era when we kind of grew up together in Minnesota. And I said, I have to go back and invest in soccer. And the more I thought about it, it wasn't the soccer that made me who I am. And if I'm really honest, the soccer community really did not embrace me. I mean, I was a black player that had to leave this country to go get noticed, right? I was from Minnesota. You didn't get tons of college offers. I played in the World Cup, I played in the Champions League, but I still wasn't embraced. I was still labeled an athlete. And so I wanted to do what I was raised to do by people, which was giving back. And I decided that, we weren't going to offer scholarships and label kids. We were going to make everything 100% free. And so it expanded to be more holistic. But today we have free sports camps for 8,000 kids, and we hire 150 high school kids, and the biggest dome in Minnesota. And if you're not from Minnesota, that may not seem like a big deal, but when you can fit 2 soccer fields inside when it's 30 below, it's a big deal. So my mom and the community, and actually the number one thing that inspired me is what this game did for me. I've had a good life. And so I'm trying to reproduce that so other people have the same opportunities I have. And we've changed our motto to human development. It used to be, we want to help kids play, go to college, get a job. And now I want to give kids the resources and the education and the opportunity to decide what they want to do that makes them happy. And that's my goal.
Well, congratulations on that, but you brought up something really important there. You said something, it brings people together, and I think that's what this sport does. Not only players who are playing, but families who are watching. I think this is something that people can coalesce around, and it's certainly something that helps nurture, whether you're watching it together, whether you're at home on TV, or you're at practice, or you're somewhere. I think this really brings that continuity of being together and having fun on it. Evan, Chicago Fire, I mean, give us a little bit more of what you're planning. What's next for you? How do you do this? How's that fan base out there? How do they react? Give us a little bit of insight on some of that, please.
Yeah, the initiative that we're working on right now is still being named. My boss likes to call it FC 77, and I like 77 FC, so he's not here, so I'll call it 77 FC, which is really, a comprehensive, attempting to be comprehensive and kind of like take all of the things that we're all talking about here, and there's 77 communities in Chicago, right, in Cook County, and we would like to be part of creating the first municipal-wide free soccer programming, right? So how are we going to do that? We can't do that by ourselves. We don't have the money or the amount of people. So, the thing that we're doing right now is a gap assessment, right? An assessment of soccer in Cook County. And I think that, again, I'm pretty particular about words, right? Like a lot of people say, like, we're bringing soccer or we're developing soccer, and it's this verb, I guess. And I'm taking a step back, or we at the Fire are taking a step back, and there's a humility to this work, right? And adidas says, like, we're this global brand, and we don't understand the hyper-locality of soccer, right? And the same thing can be said for any city. In Chicago, 77 communities, insanely diverse. The hyper-locality of each area is so important. And we would be arrogant to think that we would bring soccer to Pilsen, right? Soccer has existed in Pilsen for a very long time. Now, it may not interact with U.S. soccer that's in Chicago, right? It may not interact with our academy coaches, but those are structural reasons, right? So what we're doing right now is, we've assessed, where our youth programs are, our pay-for-pay programs, our adult rec programs, our academy programs, our free clinics. We're in about, I'd say about 46 of the 77 communities. And then working with Laureus, Center for Healing and Justice Through Sport, to identify those Tony Sana foundations of the world, right, in our area that have been providing soccer, whether it's urban initiatives or scores or YMCA or whomever, right? And then also the ethnic leagues, right? In Chicago, we have ethnic whites, we have Germans, we have Africans, Asians, Latinos, right? All with these ethnic leagues where typically they would not interact with the pay-for-play, white, affluent suburban model, right? And just reaching out to them, it's very slow work. Like reaching out to them, what do you all need, right? The Fire is not coming in here to bulldoze and bring you soccer. We know that you've been playing soccer, and maybe it's futsal, maybe it's long ball, maybe it's chaos or whatever it is. I don't care. It's soccer. What do you need to help support and amplify whatever it is that you're doing? And we have coach educators on our staff who are providing coaching to over 100 coaches a year. We obviously have adidas sponsorship, so we have equipment that we can provide, right? We have coaching, we have referees, education and referees that we can provide. Sometimes it's access to our space, right? We have multiple facilities throughout the area. So 77 football communities is the big lift that we're looking to get in action prior to the World Cup to make this geographically accessible and economically accessible and culturally accessible soccer, right? Because again, these are not all going to be Chicago Fire coaches. We're just going to, support, amplify the people who have already been doing those things in their respective communities. That's the goal.
That's a goal, no pun intended. You had mentioned futsal. Diego, what are some of the main challenges that you see right now?
Well, the biggest challenge for us is not having a professional league where we can provide to the kids, to the youth, the young players, a pathway to play professional as an option for them, because maybe they cannot, like me. I played a little bit soccer. I need to be honest, I was super bad for soccer, but then I need to be honest, right? And then I find my way on futsal. And then I decided to play futsal. I focus on futsal, and then I made it professional for 20 years. So for me, the biggest challenge in the US is not having a professional league who can provide the young players to play professional as an option, or maybe I have a small academy, futsal academy in Dallas, and I have about 100 players, okay, young players. So, and 5%, maybe 10% of them wants to play only futsal. They don't want to play soccer because they know the benefits from futsal, right? The time, space, creativity, IQ game, right? Those two words for me is the key words to develop players, because through those words, creativity, you have to make your decision quickly, right? And you have to execute your techniques quickly, right? And the IQ game, right? You have to predict, you have to visualize everything before you receive the ball, right? Before you are receiving the ball, predict, where is my partner? Where is that player? Where is that player? So anyway, I'm going to technical stuff, so I don't want to be go deeper on that. But answer your question, for me, maybe one day we're going to have a professional league, and then we can have a pathway for these young players to play professional futsal as well, because today they need to go internationally to make it professionally.
Well, that's why this panel is called Changing the Game and How Can We do better. I know we're probably running low on time, but let's get some closing comments on this, if you don't mind, on how we wrap up and what are the next steps. There's so many exciting things that are happening, but we want to make sure that a lot of the local communities have access to these great players, these great games, the game in general. I think Sammy, you had mentioned, and I think a lot of the folks, especially participate, are lucky to have adidas as a sponsor. They have the equipment, the uniform that they, I don't think, normally would be able to afford and to play, and that's a big deal for a lot of families. What type of response do you get from, if any, from people for being able to provide that?
Yeah, I think the response isn't always directed at Adidas, but through the nonprofits that we work with. I mentioned we were at the Unity Cup, which is like the culminating tournament for Just Ball, which is a co-created league with U.S. Soccer Foundation, just finished its second season ever. And being on the ground, people were so excited. And we're like, how often do you do these tournaments? And all of us there were like, yeah, like once a year. But thank you for being interested. Thank you for being here. And I think, someone from my team in LA came out who doesn't work on the Purpose team, doesn't maybe have as much visibility to the kind of work that we're supporting. He came out and he was a little bit taken aback. Like, there are 500 kids here. This is kind of crazy. Because the foundation can do things at scale for an incredible amount of youth for very little resources, which I think large brands sometimes don't think is possible. We trick ourselves into thinking it's not possible. And the more that we're able, for me internally, give visibility to that reaction internally and get more buy-in from our leaders and from Europe, who maybe doesn't understand the need, is better than really helping us out, really.
That's great.
Evan, closing thoughts?
Yeah, I guess the only thing, I'm hopeful, despite my criticalness. I am hopeful, and the one thing I would say is there are so many people doing so many cool things, and it's on us to come to these projects with humility and openness and the willingness to collaborate, right? And not be so territorial. It's so strange. It's so natural, but it's also so strange. We're all in the soccer world, and a lot of times we can't work with each other because of some, interpersonal thing or structural thing. And I just really look forward to these types of forums where we can impress upon people that working together, like on the soccer field, that's how you get things done, regardless of your brand or your organization or what have you.
Tony, you've shared a lot, inspired a lot. Closing thoughts?
Just, I think we have to make tough choices. The game does bring people together, and we have resources. I think we have to figure out how to sustain it. I can rent my dome out for 10 hours and make $5,000, or I can host a free citywide league every Saturday. I choose to do a citywide league because that's my mission. And so the question is what's everyone's mission? But we do have to, with respect to, money's a big deal here, and we'd all be lying if we didn't say it was. So how do we sustain it and work together? And you can get rich and invest in the community, or you can invest in the community and it help you get rich. So everyone's got to pick their own path.
Well said. Diego?
So my colleagues already said everything that I think as well. But of course, keeping the community in a good and healthy environment, it's good, right? Because it's easy to work with talent players, good players. But the good feeling is when you are changing their lives. So you can hear from the players and also from the parents that you are changing our lives through soccer, through futsal, through any sports. It doesn't matter what sports we are playing. So we are changing lives. And that's where we need to keep working to keep the community busy, to keep the community, the good environment for the community. Everything is for the kids, everything for them.
Well, okay.
It's a tough act to follow of closing remarks. I think the one piece I would add is, we need to continue to listen to the young people, right, and what they want in these spaces, and then in turn look at ourselves and say, okay, are we prepared to craft those spaces and make, the sport not only accessible, but a place they want to be and they want to come back to and they want to bring their friends. And so how do we continue to center that voice of the young person in what we're doing, right, in the grassroots game, I think is really important.
I think we've said a lot today, but we have